William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Okay, folks, we're going to start. And intention is to get you out of here by 1:15. Want to respect that. And so we'll go through a presentation, and then we'll leave time for Q&A. My name is David Gruber. I am the Development and Communications Director for Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance. That's a fancy way of saying that I don't do any of the actual work. I tell you about it, then I demand that you pay for it. So I have seated the crowd here with colleagues of mine who actually do the real work. And so this presentation is really intended to kind of pull back a little bit and talk about, on the very, very basic level, what homelessness is all about, what a homeless response system is all about. And I've purposefully left out a lot of the acronyms and alphabet soup and jargon. Because a lot of times what we do, and I know I felt this way when I started working for MDHA, is that I came into a room and there were a lot of people, and they at least all were pretending that they understood what they were doing, and they, you know, the sentences sounded something like this. So we got the COC with the NOFA, and HUD's gonna, yeah, but they're gonna care about the HMIS. Okay, what about the, you know, and I'm like, what language do these people actually speak? I don't understand anything they're saying. And so I think that probably happens to me because I'm, you know, just not as smart as other people, but it probably happens to other people too. And so I thought we could take this session where usually we kind of zero in on a very specific issue, just to pull back, give a very general description of what we're all about. Now, and I have, once again, seated the crowd with colleagues of mine who do the actual work, so if you have a question, so we'll have a short period of Q&A at the end, and I'm going to urge you to keep those in forms of questions that can actually be answered. If there's something that goes below that very basic level, I will probably call on one of them to answer it. Okay, so MDHA, and I called this Ending Homelessness Together because that's really what a homeless response system is all about. It's about ending homelessness together. And our goal, our mission, is to make the experience of homelessness in Dallas and Collin counties rare, brief, and non-recurring, to lead that effort. Okay, so I want you to imagine for a moment that we could really end homelessness. So a lot of people want to help the homeless, and that's wonderful. For many years, one could argue that we kind of managed homelessness. But what happens if we imagine that we could eradicate it? Imagine that we could treat it like one of the other social ills of the past. Because if you think about it, in the past, if I would have stood here in front of you in this very state, I'd say 200 years ago, and I'd say, you know, one day there's not going to be slavery anymore. Not only that, people are going to think it was a tremendously barbaric and dehumanizing practice, and they're going to be embarrassed of it. So embarrassed that they're going to make believe that it wasn't really that bad, right? You would say, you're crazy, David. There's no way that's going to happen, right? If 40 years ago I told you, or maybe not 40, but 50, certainly 60, I would say, you know, that whole system of segregation that we have, we're getting rid of that too. You'd say, well, come on, we're in Texas. That's never going to happen, right? And I was brainstorming yesterday. So inequality of women, inequality of those with disabilities, anti-Semitism, genocide of the Native Americans. These are all things that at the time seemed like, well, there's no way we ever get past that, right? And homelessness just seems, ever since the late 1970s, this crisis, the modern homelessness crisis, has been with us, that we just kind of take it for granted. It's always going to be here. But what I'm asking you to imagine is that we could actually end homelessness. Make what we see now on our streets and in our shelters, make this a thing of the past. Now we have to qualify what we mean. And I mentioned the late 1970s for a reason. So we don't mean no one ever becomes homeless. Right? So if you go back in history of the United States, of other countries, there always was homelessness. And to an extent, unless we have a form of government, right? So my understanding, I'm probably wrong about this too. My understanding is that in the Soviet Union, what would happen is they would assign you an apartment, right? So that under that form of government, it's very easy to totally eradicate homelessness. There are a few minor disadvantages with that form of government, so we stay away from that, right? We've kind of learned, it's probably not a great idea, right? But so we're not talking about nobody ever becomes homeless. As long as we have property, right, there's going to be a certain churn and people are going to become homeless. What we're talking about is changing the situation we have since the late 1970s, where homelessness is by no means rare, by no means brief, and does happen to people more than once. We want to go back to that pre-late 1970s era where one could argue that homelessness rarely happened, right? When it did, it was brief, and it usually didn't happen to the same person again. That's what we want to go back to. We want to go back to a situation where we have a system set up that if you do, that will try to prevent you from becoming homeless, so it'll happen rarely. If you do become homeless, we'll get you back housed as soon as possible, and we'll make sure it never happens to you, to that same person again. So let's pull back for a second. What are we talking about, right? We hear a lot of different numbers out there. These are the numbers from the point in time count that we have once a year, right? And you can see all the way going back to 2015 to today. Now it's important to qualify. This is the number of people that are homeless at a given time, right? So at one time. And it is an approximation. We've gotten fairly good over the course of these last few years of counting people in a real methodical fashion. We didn't really have that before. And so now we're pretty methodical about it. And we're pretty sure that a good estimate is that at any one time we have about this number of folks that are homeless. Now, you have to realize, and my colleague Lester gave a really good analogy to this. This is a photo, okay? This is not a video. Meaning, if you take a look at an entire year, right? So if you're not taking a photo, a snapshot of what's happening at one time, but you're doing that, kind of slow photography where you record all the homeless over the course of a year, you're going to have 10 to 11,000 people in Dallas and Collin counties that are homeless, right? But most of them are going to cycle in, cycle out of homelessness. There might be 10 to 11,000 people that experience homelessness over the course of a year. Some of them might be for a week, some of them might be for months, some of them might be for the whole year. So it's very important to kind of differentiate between those two numbers. But that's basically just in terms of the numbers what we're talking about. Now this, many times when we talk about homelessness, if you are not somebody who has ever experienced homelessness, it seems like something very foreign, and you're like, well, could I ever become homeless? Right? And many times we talk about, well, I'm one paycheck away, right? You've heard that. A lot of people now have savings and everything, right? So, and that gets to, people want to know, well, why does homelessness happen? What is the cause of homelessness, right? Because I don't want to be homeless, right? It doesn't sound like a great experience to have, right? So how can I prevent that? And possibly we're also asking, what's wrong with them that they became homeless? Right? What did they do wrong? Because we're, in the United States, we sometimes have this approach of if you play by the rules and work hard and blah, 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 everything will work out mathematically. We kind of know that's not true, but, we kind of set that aside. And so we want to know why does homelessness happen? There are a lot of different reasons out there that we hear, and it's important to pinpoint the right reason, because if we don't know what the right reason is, we're going to apply the wrong solution. Okay, so a lot of people are like, well, it's poverty, right? Poverty. And if you think about Dallas County, this is the number of people. This, by the way, we have improved. So the new model for Dallas could be, we're not as bad as Philadelphia, right? We probably don't want to advertise that, right? So we're number 3 now for the level of poverty. But that's, if you do some quick math, right, it's about 20% of Dallas County. Now let's, for a second, think, those are the number of homeless. I'm not that good at math, but that's about less than 1%, right? I think, something like that. So it's not poverty. Most people who are poor manage to remain housed. Okay, now they might not live in the same exact conditions as you and me, but they manage to remain housed. So it's not poverty. Well, maybe lack of affordable housing, right? We don't have enough affordable housing, and so that's why people become homeless, is the lack of affordable housing. Now I put an asterisk next to that one because, we're going to get back to that one. File that away. We're going to get back to that one. But it is important to note that though we have 8.3 million households, right, that are defined as worst-case housing needs, I'm going to put this on the web. You'll be able to click through and see exactly what that means. Right? But we only have about 500,000 people that are homeless at any one given time in the United States. So what's going on? How do those households manage to remain housed? I know what it is. It's eviction. I saw a great thing in the Onion, by the way. If any of you don't read the Onion, you should. Okay? But it had myths and facts about homelessness, and it had myth. People are homeless because they're addicted to drugs. Fact. You are too. Okay? And so this is the United States. We like to say, oh, it's them, right? Those people that are on drugs or alcohol or whatever. But it's actually us. Okay? And there aren't 120 million people about to become homeless. And by the way, a lot of people manage to take drugs at home and remain housed. Right? That's why you see these numbers, but don't see 120 million people who are homeless. Because it's a fact of life. A lot of us take drugs or alcohol or whatever, but for us it's okay, right? Because we're housed. Okay, I know. Mental illness, right? Definitely mental illness. Not really. This is different, by the way. Some of these numbers are just, general numbers. This is every year, right? So again, people cycle in, cycle out. I'm not afraid to share with you that I took 50 milligrams of Paxil this morning, and that's how my sunny disposition actually arrived. You would not want to see me or interact with me if I stopped taking that. So a lot of people suffer mental illness, right? But somehow remain housed. Okay, this is a really, really good one, right? So the way out of homelessness, and this is, the other way of putting this is, if you fix this problem, you won't be homeless anymore, right? So mental illness, if you fix that problem, you won't be homeless. But most people are not homeless, and they still have mental illness. This is a big one, and it's like, listen, if you find Jesus, you won't be homeless anymore. Right? I mean, I hate to be crass about it, but that's what we're talking about. Right? So your problem is, right, you've become homeless, and the way out of homelessness is that you need to find God and religion. Well, I mean, again, if you look, all of these things sound good in your head and they make sense, but there's this pesky thing called facts that we need to look at. And so we look at Scandinavian countries. I just kind of pick on Denmark, right? But the Scandinavian countries, the levels of faith and belief are very low, and somehow they manage to have much lower levels of poverty, and they have a tiny, tiny bit of homelessness. Now, I'm not saying, because usually I can kind of, if I can read a crowd, I can see people getting a little uncomfortable, right? You're kind of, you're causing me this is very disconcerting to hear all these things, right? Because I thought, that these are very much connected with homelessness. I'm not saying that any of these statements are not true, right? I don't think anybody would argue with any of these statements. But again, it doesn't help us answer the question. And if we don't know what the question is, we don't know what the answer is. If we don't know what the problem is, we can never reach the solution.
Exactly.
So again, we're kind of left with that question. And here really is the answer, and this is going to lead us to the solution. I like to think of it as, if you think about if you're a trapeze artist, I think only have one net usually. Sometimes they do it without a net. That's crazy. Okay. Think of it as 3 nets, right? So think of it, most of us will not become homeless because we have these nets that will catch us.
Yeah.
right? Net number one is your income, right? As long as you have a job or, I don't know, a trust fund or whatever, right? You will be fine. You will be caught by the income net. Let's say tomorrow I lost my job, right? Most of us have some assets, some wealth, maybe a 401k we can dip into, right? So we have some assets we can utilize, so we fall through the income net and the wealth net will catch us. But even if we depleted all of that, we probably wouldn't become homeless because we've got this final net that is the network of our social connections, right? So we have family, we have friends, maybe we belong to a church, maybe we belong to a social club. We have all these different people, right? I may not be the nicest house guest in the world, right? But if I have enough friends, I can manage to double up and sleep on somebody's couch. And so homelessness occurs when that final net is broken. When you fall through that final net, you don't have, or you've frayed those social connections, or they were poor to start with and they could not be adequately activated. And so this is the focus of the law that we operate under. Okay, so the idea is to have a homeless response system, and now that we'll talk in a second about what that exactly looks like. Hint, if you took the handouts on the way in, then you already have it in your hand, right? But the way we solve this problem is we put in place a homeless response system that really steps into that gap, right? Is that additional, okay, you've fallen through that net, right? So this is, the homeless response system is going to help get you back on your feet and ideally help and rebuild that network of social connections too. And so we operate under a law called the 2009 Hearth Act. Again, I'll put this up on the web. You can click through and read. You probably fall asleep while you're doing it because it's very, very long, right? It's Federal Register. Yeah. And then slightly more interesting and readable is Opening Doors, which is the 2009 Hearth Act instructed the federal government to submit a national strategic plan to end homelessness, to submit that to Congress. And you can read through that. It makes a tiny bit more sense than the Hearth Act, which is very legalese. But one of the major focuses of it is every community in the United States has to have a homeless response system. And so there are about 450 bodies like MDHA, right, in different communities in the United States they're tasked. The focus of our work is developing an effective and unified homeless response system that will help a person who has fallen through all those three nets, right, get back on their feet and reconnect to the community and become housed. Who said this, by the way? Anybody know? Benjamin Franklin. Attributed to Benjamin, probably not Benjamin Franklin. Attributed to Benjamin Franklin. Probably made up in 1840, long after he was dead. But it sounds like the kind of thing Ben Franklin would say, right? And I like this graphic. I saw it the other day because this really speaks to what a homeless response system is all about. We have a lot of different, every community has wonderful organizations, and this develops organically over time. If you go back and read the history of the homelessness organizations, homelessness providers in the United States and Dallas and other cities, they kind of develop organically. But a lot of times what happened is they're kind of each operating on their own. They're doing great work, but they're doing it on their own. And so what needs to happen, right, for a homeless response system is to really, everybody needs to start working together. So what does that look like? Again, I'm into asking questions and getting the right answers. These two slides that I'm going to show you now might be the most important slides today. Okay? Least fancy, most important. So here's how things used to be, right? So you are homeless, you approach a program. When I say used to, I'm being very generous. Still, we're working on this, right? But this is kind of where we started. And that was you approaching, you're homeless, I'm homeless, I approach a program, and I say, I need help. And the question that is asked in the intake process, even if it's not asked explicitly, the underlining question that is asked is, are you a good fit for us? Right? Are you a good fit for us? will you be successful in this program? And it makes sense, right? Why would I want you in a program that you're not going to be successful in? Totally makes sense, right? But what that causes is that the easier it is to help you, better a chance that I'm going to accept you into my program, right? And if you look like you've got a lot of problems, right, a lot of things you need to deal with, well, the chances are, it's just simple math. Chances are you're going to be less successful, so I maybe won't want to take you into my program. And so that's the wrong question. We said, you know what? Got to start asking this question instead. Now you'll notice one word that is missing from that longer question, program. Because honestly, do you think that if I'm homeless, I care about your program?
Nope.
Not really. I just don't want to be homeless anymore. And so the question is, what solutions, right, not programs, because sometimes maybe it's not a program, it's just a solution. What solutions best match the needs of this person? So we forget the program, we're focusing on you. You need help. What are your needs? And what's going to help you end your homelessness quickly and permanently? Again, we're trying to get to that rare, brief, non-recurring. Now, it's not only, David, those are the same questions. Yes, they are. It's not only important what the question is, it's important who asks it. Going back to this slide. If you're just the tail, right, and you're asking the question, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Because maybe my needs are, in the NJ or NY or whatever it is. So, if every program separately asks that old-fashioned question, that's not going to be helpful. So instead, we have to make sure that everybody is working together. So you may approach Organization A. And actually, you know what? Organization C is going to be the best match for you. But what we do is we form a system where regardless of where you approach us, you're talking to the entire system. Right? So now that person's paycheck might say Organization A, but they're working on behalf of the system, and so they're going to make sure that you get the help that you need from Organization C. Okay, so it's making sure that we're all working together for the homeless person, and not working each on our own and saying, well, my program, my program, my program. And so the role of MDHA, and again, counterpart in every American community, we like to think in Dallas that we are the best thing since sliced bread. And we are, of course. But this is happening all over the country. It's a federal mandate. And so the idea is, and once I put this up on the web, again, this is the very simple, kind of basic layer. If you want a 40-page, very, very complicated explanation of this, that again, will probably put you to sleep, you click on that. And that'll give you all the alphabet soup, and all the acronyms and all the technical stuff if you're into that. So our role is very specific. Develop and quarterback an effective unified homeless response system where all homeless services programs work together to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. Again, it's that emphasis that we're all working together in the service of that person who's experiencing homelessness. So this is what it looks like. Hopefully you all picked this up on your way in. This was actually made, yes, I know we're not in 2014, but we're also not in Kansas City. But again, remember what I said. Every American community, right? So this infographic, because a lot of times when you explain this stuff and you're throwing around words, it can be fairly meaningless. And I found this is one of the best tools for me when I started doing this to understand what a homeless response system looks like or should look like. So I'm going to walk you through the 4 major components of what a homeless response system looks like. So I'm going to go through the slides now, but you feel free to take a look at your little infographic as I do that, because we're going to touch on different parts of it. Number 1, and this is counterintuitive, right? See over there? Diversion and prevention. Counterintuitively, guess what I want? I don't want anybody in my homeless response system that doesn't belong there. I'd rather divert you from the homeless response system. What does that mean? Well, what we have to take into account, and we all value what we do, and we are attached to our work, and part of our ego comes from our work, but really, there should be, imagine another 2/3. So imagine it goes all the way over here and all the way over there. Right? So it's a much larger screen because all those parts that are not there, probably about 70% of people, never even show up on our radar because they self-resolve. Most people will self-resolve. Again, you and I will not become homeless because we'll figure it out. We'll self-resolve. Well, guess what? A lot of people become homeless for a very short amount of time and they self-resolve. They never even show up on our radar. So if you are almost able to self-resolve, right, but you didn't, well, maybe you just need a tiny bit of help. So if you come to the shelter, maybe rather than saying, hey, welcome in, right, let's put you in the same program with everybody, right, because we just do things one way here. We got one program. Instead, what if I say, well, why do you want to get into the shelter? They're like, well, tell me what happened. Well, you got evicted. Okay. Do you have family here? Yep, my mom. Why don't you go to your mom? Well, we haven't spoken for 3 years. Well, why haven't you spoken? Oh, we had a fight. Remember what it was about? Nope. Well, were you housed at the time? Yes. Well, if you called up your mom and said, got evicted, what would she say? Come on over. And what are you doing here? Let's make that phone call. So that, now, you know, that's a very simple and I'm sure that Dustin, who's sitting here from Austin Street, could give us 20 more versions of that, right? Because they're very good at that at Austin Street, at this whole idea of diversion. But that's the idea, is don't treat homelessness like a homogeneous blob, right? A lot of this stuff is based on, you may have heard him personally or heard of him, Dr. Ian DeYoung, and one of his greatest sayings to me is, if you've seen one homeless person, you've seen one homeless person. Just like us, right? We're all individuals. So, this comes from the whole idea of what we call in sociology and psychology progressive engagement, right? A lot of the people will not need a ton of help. And so we, first of all, try to divert you entirely from the system. Number 2, and this is going back to, I love this little gate, right? Again, it's not, in the bad old days, it was basically, everybody needs transitional housing, regardless of your situation. Everybody's going to do the same thing. And it's like first come, first serve. But now we say no. Assess, prioritize, and place. So we have one entry point only. Now it's a virtual entry point. So again, you show up at organization B or C or D or E or F, right? And they'll get you to the right place, but they're all part of the one system, and they're all going to do this for you. So rather than just saying, hey, come on in, they're going to say, well, stop for a second. Again, we're not looking to put you in a program. What we're asking is, what solutions do you need to help end your homelessness quickly and permanently? Well, we got to figure out what your needs are. And we probably should do it objectively. So we use an objective, uniform, evidence-based tool. I promise no acronyms, but one. The VI-SPDAT. It means nothing, right? If you're not, it hardly means anything to me. Again, I don't do the work. I just tell you about it, right? But the VI-SPDAT is what we use, and it assesses, the case manager walks the person through it, assesses all of their needs. Then we prioritize, because again, it's not homogeneous. Some people need a ton of help. Some people need us to help make a phone call to mom, right? So we gotta figure out what your needs are. We're gonna prioritize you based on your vulnerability and your specific needs. And then, right, if you do have those needs, we put you, rather than just being like first come, first serve, or you know what, I'm going to get into housing because I've been a case manager here for 10 years, and my cousin is a case manager at the other organization, I'll talk to them and I'll sneak you in. No. Everybody is housed through this process. Everybody goes onto a unified housing priority list where they are all on that list according to their, if you really, really need help, right? So you're probably going to do what's called a P1 to a P4. you're going to be on the top of the list. And we're going to house you as soon as we can. If your needs are less, you might be a P5 to a P8 or a P9 to a P12, right? Depending on your needs. And we're going to house you according to your needs. And that is the only way that you're going to get housed, through that list. This is another way of looking at it. This is more specific to Dallas. All right, so just think about it very logically. These are the places people can come from entering the system. This is what happens in the system, is we make sure that they have the proper documentation, make sure that we assess them, we triage, right? Triage, make sure, who has more needs, who has less needs. We go on the housing priority list. And then some of them are going to need a permanent solution. They have very high vulnerability and a lot of dollar signs because that costs a lot of money. Some of them are going to have lesser needs. Conversely, it's going to cost less money. This kind of fits with what you see here, right? These three different solutions, more or less. Now this might be one of the most important here. I already said that about another slide. But all roads lead to housing. So the entire system is oriented towards housing, using a housing first approach. Okay, housing first, again, we're not going to get into a huge amount of detail there, but housing first basically is based on the philosophy that we're all ready to be housed. And there's a sense of urgency in getting everyone into housing as soon as possible, especially if they're high on the list. Get them into housing as soon as possible, with as few barriers as possible. And in the meantime, this might be my favorite part of the whole infographic. See, that's the shelter. That's it. Does anybody here live at a bus stop? No, nobody lives at a bus stop, right? And that is exactly what the shelter should be, is it is a stop on the way to housing. And so what this might look like is so I came in there and you asked me the question about, okay, I fought with my mom and whatever, but mom then passed away, unfortunately. I got nowhere to go. I literally have nowhere to go. Again, my social connections, that final net is broken. And so I need to get into the shelter. I have nowhere else to go. So when we take you into the shelter, we don't just say, well, welcome in, you can spend here as much time as you want. We say, that's great. Tomorrow we're going to start talking about your housing plan. And Susie, I'm not going to be here because I'm going to be sleeping because I'm on the night shift. Tomorrow you have lucked out because Susie is the best. Right? That's your script. Maybe Susie's not the best, but who cares? Right? Whoever it is, they're the best. And Susie is going to take such good care of you, and you're going to talk about your housing plan. It's going to be great. And then you wake up in the morning, now Susie's not there yet, right? But you're actually just going to get some food, and the guy serving you the food says, hey, how's it going? I'm Jim. What's your name? And what's your housing plan? And you're like, what? What's your housing plan? What's your housing plan? Constantly ask that question. And we make that part of the culture, right, in the system, is that you are constantly asking yourself, and others are asking you, what is your housing plan? And we're helping you get into housing as soon as possible. Right now, we are in the midst of a housing shelter, an emergency shelter challenge. We called it our 90 and 90 because we wanted to house our partners, right? We wanted to lead our partners in housing 90 people in 90 days. 3 different shelters: Austin Street, the Bridge, Salvation Army. As of last count, we're 159, which I'm told is more than 90. I'm not sure. All right? And it all comes from this approach, that everybody in the shelter is responsible for housing. And everybody's asking, what is your housing plan? The very first or second week, was it, Dustin? The security guy, the security officer at Austin Street, right, housed 4 people. Now, if you're in the old mode, you'd be like, well, what are you doing? You're in charge of security. Stay in your lane. No. Again, it's just like the philosophy in schools now. If you come from an educational background, it's no more like the teacher does the teaching and everybody else, stays in their lane. Everybody's required to educate. We're all educators. Same thing. If you work in the system, we're all responsible for housing. And this is something, this was from a few years ago actually, but I love it, I keep it, because this happens to be from Austin Street. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us who work, who do this work, right, we do it because we believe in it, but, kind of at the end of the day, we get a paycheck, right? And so there's a certain level of authenticity that we don't have. But when you see this, when you're in the shelter and you see this, and these people, those faces are saying, we got housing, you can too, then that's going to convince you that what is your housing plan is not just, something that we say, but it's actually something that can happen. Now, I promise no acronyms, but, I'm going to break my promise slightly here. Okay? So this is very important, and on your little map here, it's what shows up here. This is very important, and it's a little technical, but I included it anyway, because the only way any system will work is if we have accountability. All right, accountability, and where we all are able to see all of the data that's going on in the system. If you don't know what's going on, right? So if I, for instance, want to figure out what the most common color of eyes is in this room, but you all go like that when I'm trying to check, I got no data. If only half of you go like that and half of you are like, yeah, check. Again, I can't come to any meaningful conclusions based on 50% of the population. So we have to make sure that we have all of the data in the system, that every single program that is working in the system reports their data. And it's very basic things. I'm not the technical person, but it's how many people do you have? How long have they been homeless? Have they been homeless before? Right? There's no way we can get to rare, brief, non-recurring if we don't have very basic information in the system. The only way we can improve, right, is if we know what's going on. And we can work on that data and take a look at the numbers and take a look at what's going on. And as late as 2014, we had 0 shelter beds in our system. 0. Now, a few months later, we had 3%, which was great. It was 300% better. Ever notice those things? You got to be very careful when you're given, like, this drug is 300% better than the other one. Yeah, because it's not 0, it's 3%. But anyway, right now we are at 66%. It took a really long time to get there. And by the way, the federal government says you need to be at 86% before we really consider you to be anything close to serious. Okay, so we're still working on that. Okay. So what does this not solve? Kind of going back to the beginning. It's really important to remember that there are a bunch of things that we are not going to solve. So people will invariably say, online, in person, various public forums, well, why aren't you? Well, why don't you? Well, why can't you solve? Right? And I'm going to be very open with you. These things that we talked about before, the homeless response system is not going to solve these problems. We are not going to solve mental illness. We are not going to solve poverty, substance abuse, or even the lack of affordable housing. Now you might say, well, David, that's very inconsiderate of you. Why don't you want to solve those problems? Here's why we can't solve those problems. This is the old budget, by the way, not the new budget. This is the federal budget. It's about $4 trillion. One more acronym. The entire continuum of care program, which is the major program, the most important program that funds, homeless services programs, is $2 billion. So I'm not good at math, so I used a calculator. That is 1/2000th of the budget. And that's for the entire country. So that's why we're not going to solve all those other problems. Now, I wanted to talk also about, we said I'd talk about affordable housing, kind of that asterisk. But I want you to think about this too, because affordable housing at the end of the day is very much connected to what we do. This is from a previous hard conversation when we had Dr. Barbara DiPietro here a few months ago. Again, if you click on this, it'll take you straight to watching her presentation. But this is what we're looking at in the United States. These are the facts that we're dealing with when it comes to affordable housing on the national level. I want you to imagine for just a moment, I'm going to zero in on the second one. Okay? I want you to imagine what would happen if tomorrow the federal government said, you know that mortgage interest deduction that everybody can take? We're so sorry, we've run out. And only 1 in 4 will now be able to take the mortgage interest deduction. But it's fine, don't worry. The rest of you can get on a waiting list. But the waiting list only opens for 48 hours every 3 years. Okay? And getting on the waiting list doesn't mean you're getting anything. You're going to be on a waiting list. And there are tens of thousands of people ahead of you, right? So that's what housing assistance looks like. Okay? So now these are not laws of nature. These were not handed down by God to Moses on Sinai. These are policy decisions that we made as a country. And we could change this. We could make other decisions. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. That yes, we as a homeless response system can't solve affordable housing. But we as a people can. We're not victims, but we can do this if we want to. Anybody know who that guy was, by the way? Who do you think this is?
This is Joe Biden.
Who said his dad? Yes, his dad. It's not Joe Biden. Anyway, it's not Joe Biden himself, it's Joe Biden Sr. But, and it's a profound statement if you think about it. We can say that we value things. But really, here's how you know what we value. Anybody here like military hardware? I love military hardware. I'm a terrible person, I know. I admire military hardware. By the way, I looked at how much it held, because again, that could, if we wanted to house all of the homeless folks in Dallas, we're landlocked, so it's a problem, but we conceivably could do it on the aircraft carrier. This is the newest aircraft carrier. It's a CVN-78. I love this thing. This one is specifically, the one you're looking at is named for President Ford. So it's the Gerald R. Ford, USS Gerald R. Ford. Now, this nice piece of hardware costs $13 billion. We have 12 of those. Not the new ones. We got some old ones too. They're fairly good. Not as pretty as this one. But again, take a look at the comparison between the two things. Just looking at that, if I'm an alien who arrived from outer space, I would say, well, obviously you value this, and you don't value this. I mean, it's very clear. And you can say, no, it's very clear what you value. Because again, you're showing me what you value. Okay. So I want you to keep that in mind, right? And that's not part of the discussion of the homeless response system. But you can't have a discussion about the homeless response system without at least touching on affordable housing in general, and just the idea that the fact that we invest in some things and don't invest in other things is because we've made a decision not to. Okay, so what do we need from the community, right? Members of the community, you are representative of those, right? Obviously, every nonprofit, right, needs to keep the lights on. We just set a date for the homeless count. We need 1,500 volunteers. It's a bit away, but mark it on your calendar. Just save the date. Try to advocate for what works. Now, you might say, David, sounds awfully superfluous. Why would I advocate for something that doesn't work? Well, here's our tendency as human beings. As human beings, we often advocate for what we think works or what we wish would work. Okay? Very often, that's where we end up. So try to advocate for what actually works, not what we think works or what we wish would work. And again, we go back to that again and again. Advocate for more housing. Because we could have the best physical embodiment of this infographic. If there's no affordable housing, it's not going to work. And thankfully, I can tell you that the city of Dallas is actually, right, the choices we talked about here, these are all things on a national level, right? If tomorrow the federal government decided that anybody who qualifies can get housing assistance, it would change the landscape, right? We'd have to do some serious construction, but it would change the landscape. But things can be done on the individual level too, as a city. And so you might have heard very recently, I was at a very good presentation yesterday, where they talked about how Dallas is really taking some action on this very, very important point in terms of affordable housing. And they're kind of approaching it. What I liked about it is they're not doing like one thing, right? When somebody says, I've got the one solution for your problem and it's you got to do this single thing, it's probably not true, right? They've got a whole array of things that they're going to be doing. And so that's something that we need to continue to advocate for, because City Council that's made that decision needs to know that we as citizens support that, right? Because believe it or not, the folks that don't support housing are usually not that quiet. So we need to be equally vocal just to give our politicians cover. It's a good thing. But at the end of the day, having discussed all this technical stuff, I saw this yesterday and I was like, oh, this encapsulates it. Because one of the things that I really think about, and I go back to my initial introduction to this, right? Walking into a room and they're talking about when is HUD going to announce the NOFA for the COC program? We've got to get our HMS data in. And I'm like, what? What language do these people speak? It might be, so at the end of the day, ending homelessness might be hard, but it's not complicated. And so where else could you go but Winnie the Pooh? I've been thinking, said Pooh, you have a house, Piglet, and I have a house, and they're very good houses. And Christopher Robin has a house, and Owl and Kanga and Rabbit have houses. This part I like the most. And even Rabbit's friends and relations have houses or something. Right? Not everybody has a house that I would be comfortable living in or you would be comfortable living in. A lot of people wouldn't be comfortable living in my apartment because it's an apartment, not a house. But they've all got housing. But poor ER has nothing. So what I've been thinking is, let's build him a house. That said, Piglet is a grand idea. It's really that simple. Really that simple. With that, I'll take your questions. Doc, you got the mic? So you can come over to the mic so people can hear you. If you have a question, if I can answer it, I'm going to put one of my colleagues on the spot.
You'll be live. You live?
Yeah, I can hear you. Right. Thank you, Doc.
Very early on, you mentioned that we didn't have as big of a homelessness problem in the 1970s era.
Up till the mid-1970s.
Up to the mid-1970s. What was different in that time and compared to now?
Wow. So there were a lot of things that were different. For instance, in the 1950s, so a little before that, but 1950s, 60s, eviction was something that was unheard of almost. You did evict people from their homes. Right? If you did it, it was really a last resort. Whereas today, I mean, if you've not read the book Evicted, you should. Right? So that's number one. So it's kind of that change in culture. Another thing is the mental hospital, state mental hospitals emptied out, essentially. Now, there was a good aspect to this. People were being kept Used to be you could keep somebody in a mental hospital against their will for no really good reason. So it was a civil rights issue. And then they were like, okay, we'll empty the mental hospitals, but don't worry, we're going to take the funding and treat people in the community. And it all worked very well, except for that last part. You never took the money. Whenever somebody says, don't worry, I'm taking away all this money here, I'm going to do something really good with it over here, keep an eye on your wallet. And so and there's another thing, and I heard this mentioned yesterday also on Think. They had a really, really good episode last week. I was listening to the podcast. It reminded me of SROs. So there used to be this concept called an SRO, a single resident occupancy. And so we think today of the YMCA, for instance, the YMCA as it's where you go to work out, or hopefully they do something that has to do with the sea, maybe, right? So some kind of rec center or whatever. Used to be most of the YMCAs had housing. Now it wasn't housing like you and I, our own house, but it would be, right, you've got your own room, probably usually your demographic profile is you're a guy, not a whole lot of education, not really that much of an income, but you pay a tiny bit amount of money, and you have a bed, and you have a chair and a table, and there might be some communal eating structure, a meal plan or something, and there's a restroom and showers that are shared. And so at some point in the late 70s, developers were like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Because we can probably knock that down and build condos, right? And so these are just a few of the things that lead, and there are other things, but these are kind of the few things that are most cited as leading to that problem. Yeah. Sir?
Building on that thought, I've asked this before, and I'll ask it again.
Sure.
Right now, we have a housing boom. We have more people looking for housing than there are houses to live in. So, like you said, builders are going for where's the money? Follow the money. The money's going to Frisco, a lot of it.
Sure.
Places like that, to the suburbs.
Yeah.
And secondly, they don't want to, they're looking for the highest rent that they can get.
Of course.
So now we have people in this category who are looking at 50, 60, 70% of their total income is going to rent. So as a landlord, the motivation is not to help these people, quite the opposite. They don't want these people. We have a voucher program. Say, I got a voucher, the government's going to help me pay my rent. So what? They don't take it.
Yes.
When a landlord will not take your voucher, what are your options then?
Right.
So looking at it, if I was a landlord, I said, what would it take to motivate me in order to rent to a low-income person as opposed to a high-income person?
Right.
Because I know, I have this perception, maybe it's not real, but I have this perception of the people you just described. Low income, not educated, maybe have health or drug problems. And experiences, they stay for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, they're gone, and they trash the place. And now I've got $2,000, $3,000 worth of repairs to go before I can rent it again. Where I don't have that problem with the high-income people. So what I'm asking about, is there an insurance program someplace that motivates a landlord to do this, something better than just a voucher?
Right. So there's a lot to unpack there, and some of it I'm not so sure about. I'm not so sure about part of it, but the characterization specifically. But I understand the general question is that we have to create a different incentive structure, and so we nationally we need to create a different incentive structure, and locally we need to create a different incentive structure. And so, just to talk on the local level, yesterday at this presentation that they had from the Anti-Poverty Coalition, and we heard from City Hall how, again, they're not looking at, well, here's this one thing that's going to solve it, but they are looking at creating all these different types of incentives that you can have. And even something I heard not from the city, but that the Dallas Housing Authority talked about. The head of Dallas Housing Authority was there yesterday. And he talked about the fact that, yeah, I mean, you might have a landlord who says, you know what, I got a problem, I'll take the voucher, right? But, you know, there's all this additional red tape, and I don't want to deal with the red tape. And so he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to provide some financial compensation. So basically, okay, I get it. You got to go through this checklist. You got to have an inspector. There's a little bit more red tape. How much is that red tape worth to you? Is it worth $500 per unit? Is it? And I know that there's some nonprofits that do that already on a private level. So City Square, for instance. So we do have a developer on our board actually, and he told me he works a lot with City Square, and he said, you know, we did have a problem where sometimes we'd have somebody exit a unit, and you know, there was some cleanup, there was some repairs to do, and we said to City Square, you know, this is a problem. What do we do? And City Square said, well, what if we paid for that? And he said, asked and answered. Right? So there are ways that we can alleviate some of these. Some of these are small problems. Some of these are bigger problems. Some of them we can do on a private level. Some of them we need to do on a citywide level. And nationally, we could probably create a fairly different incentive structure for folks. And so there's not going to be one answer to your question, one really simple answer, but there's going to be a lot of different things we can do. But you're right, the incentive structure needs to be changed.
Good afternoon. In regards to the incentive structures, what can we do legislatively to make it easier for local people to become landlords, maybe to buy these properties instead of having folks from other states that are absentee landlords that's been a problem forever? Why can't the mayor, or maybe since you have his ear,
Oh boy.
but we talked about that, I've heard that talked about before, having local ownership, local landlords that will be responsible and held responsible for these dumps, really. And if you keep them up, that there's an incentive. You get your landlord, you get to take in, just do if that's what you want to do. But there's got to be some way to incentivize local people to take ownership of our local area and own local properties in our local area to help each other, help ourselves also. So that didn't seem like a hard push to do. I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at my colleagues. Do we? No, I don't. I think that's kind of above. I would say above our pay grade a little bit. I mean, I think that again, some of the stuff that you run into is, if you want to solve things on the local level, you're constrained. So I don't know the answer specifically to that, but I know that, for instance, when Austin wanted to outlaw what we call source of income discrimination, right? So Austin wanted to say, you know what? You're not allowed to say, I won't take a voucher. Somebody comes in with a credit card, with a check, with cash, with a voucher, you have to consider it all the same, right? So Austin actually passed an ordinance, and Dallas was under a consent decree with HUD to consider that ordinance. They had not considered it yet. So what happened was the legislature, and they did not do this on their own, right? It's not that the state legislature came up with this on their own. They were prodded and encouraged. Basically preempted, right? This is complicated. They outlawing source of income discrimination. Right? So they passed a state law that said you cities cannot pass laws outlawing source of income discrimination. So there are states where and cities where you have to take a voucher. But even if Dallas wanted to do that, we can't do it because the state of Texas is better.
sir, excuse me, that wasn't my question.
No, I understand. Here's
my premise. If we want to build a stadium, the eminent domain, we can take your property from you.
I agree.
No matter who it is.
Yes.
We can take it away.
Sure.
My issue is how come we can't take some of these slums from properties away from people who own them
Right.
to build some property, to build some stuff under
Right.
our conditions, under Just take it.
I would take a look, so I would, again, kind of above our pay grade, I would take a look at the city's, the plan that the city just passed, which is like 143 pages long, but it does include something about, I don't know if about eminent domain, it does include using, properties that are already there. Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Because of all this new development, I've lost my job, my home in 9 years. Okay, so that question is out.
Sure.
So what about us? What are we supposed to do now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All this new development. I lost my job, my home in 9 years.
Right.
So what now?
That's, I don't know how to answer that question specifically, right,
Yeah.
regarding you. I mean,
My arms up in the air.
I understand. But there are other people in a lot of people in your situation. And yes, that's why I'm saying that we do have a problem locally, we do have a problem nationally. This is all comes from policy.
They're coming right for us, man.
I understand.
It's coming right for us.
Yes.
So I want to make it clear to my understanding, is this a volunteer thing that they sign into the program as far as the getting into
Being part of the system?
Yes.
Yeah. That's it's an excellent question. So,
And then if I may just
Yeah,
real
please,
quick,
please.
thank you. And thank you for coming out to
course.
speak. And we do have some wonderful homeless friends in our audience. The thing is what someone had told me that's in also a nonprofit said that they had text out to everyone in the nonprofit around the Dallas area to support a certain nonprofit, that they're doing great work. And texts were given back to that person saying, why would you do that? Keep the money for yourself. And so I say that to say, I applaud you for saying, yes, they have to come together. Because until we do come together, it's going to continue to be like this. We're going to continue to have meetings, how to fix it. You have great solutions to do this. I mean, and it's just, we pray that people would come together and know that there's people that can't wait, they can't wait. We have 2 that froze to death during the winter, and so, sorry for getting emotional.
No.
But
I was at the memorial service. You should get emotional. We all should get emotional about that.
I tell you, keep pushing that that people will come together. And like you said, we're at what, 80-something% or the numbers of people
In
joining?
the data system, 66%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I'd say certainly keep pushing that and hope that everybody comes together and does see the importance of that. I was at, just lastly, and thank you for the time, I was at a meeting of a large group of nonprofits, and I had one lady from the nonprofit echo what I said in that room, and that is, we want to go out of business.
Yes.
That's a good
Yes.
thing. We want to go
Yes.
out of business.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting that obviously, so I want to pinpoint one thing that you said, because there's a lot of you talk about, is this voluntary, right? So again, the structure here, and on one of those slides, you can read the really, really technical, boring way of how it works, right? And you can read through the law. But, the idea is that the federal government set up this system, and it's supposed to exist in every community. And trying to make everybody cooperate with each other and work together is a difficult thing. That's not easy, right? Saying to everybody, hey, you're all doing great work, but let's do it together because that's the only way we solve the problem. And there are various, levers we can pull. So, if you, without being too crass about it, if you happen to be an organization which is funded through our process, that's a good incentive, right, to work with the system. If you are required by the federal government to report into our system, that's a good incentive to become part of the system. Sometimes we don't have those types of incentives. So what you have to do is you have to go out and do some good old-fashioned salesmanship, right? And just say, hey, you know what, Dustin with Austin Street, this is going to be great for your organization. It's going to be great for your clients. Here's how it's going to help you, right? And then hopefully Dustin says, you know what, that sounds great. So even though I don't have to, right, I'm a private organization and I can do whatever I want. I'm going to become part of the system, and I'm going to, adopt best practices. Right? It's all dusting. It's all dusting. Okay. Last question. We'll let you end. The honor. Yes.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I am a homeless living here in Dallas. I think the main issue about being homeless here is a bit taboo to a lot of people.
Sure.
And what one homeless person does, they feel like everybody does it.
Yes.
And I'm here to squash that because we are not all the same person. The programs that are here known, they cater to a specific area. And I want to come forward and let you all know that everyone learns different. I'm very kinesthetic. So I have to have hands-on about a lot of things that I do. So for my standpoint, for things to change, the people here need to change. There needs to be more people saying, here, let me help you. Reach out your hand to people that you don't know, because we all have different things that we go through in life. And there are always going to be something that gets you down. But like you said, everybody has needs. There are people like me that don't have anything. I was adopted here. I don't have family. I barely have friends. I've been mute for 7 years. I've been talking for 2 years. So you got to bring your mind around just knowing that everybody is different. Everybody became homeless because of something that happened in their life. And anybody can become homeless. And not just to walk around and say, ew, that person's nasty, or ew, I didn't want to help them, oh, get away from me, oh, you're dirty. That can happen to you. And in the blink of an eye, you can be down here saying, where's the stupa? Where's the bridge? Where's this? And where's that? And another issue is that the places that are saying that they're helping are not really helping. There are so many times that you can go to this place and go to that place. But what if you keep going through life and making the same mistake, but you don't know what the mistake is? So we need more programs to say, hey, I'm here. Like you said, what is your problem? What do you need help with? What can we help you with? Everybody needs a plan in their life. And what we are dreamers that feel like we can't make it. A lot of us have low self-esteem. A lot of us have self-doubt. A lot of us are suicidal. A lot of us have anger issues, mental issues. Like you said, that has nothing to do with having somewhere to stay. Because mind you, a lot of people down here that live in these high rises, they're crazier than we are. My question is, Dallas, as a community, can we all come together and help? Or all we are just taboo and people that fear what we don't know. That's it.
Thank you. I don't think you guys are looking better than thank you very much.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.